Don't ever get sad, or the world will kill your best friend. By And Then They Bow. A Batman and Young Justice fanfic, rated for teen and up audiences, with additional tags for kidnapping, civilian Tim Drake, CEO Tim Drake, light angst, mild hurt comfort, idiots in love, getting together, friends to lovers, bad things happen, bingo prompt, finger in the mail. This seems angsty, but it's really not. Borderline crack, no beta, we die, aged up characters, and DC stands for disregard canon. Summary. Con can't hear Tim's heartbeat. Con can always hear Tim's heartbeat. Or, Tim Drake Wayne gets kidnapped. Connor Kent is not happy about this. For Con, it's been a long time since his best friend, and the love of his life, stopped being Robin and started being Tim. For everyone else, the switch took a little longer. Jason came back and Tim tried to give up the mantle, but Jason was angry and killing, so Tim kept the cape on. Then Dick took away the title after Bruce's death. But that wasn't how it was supposed to go, so Tim told Con to let Cassie and Bart know that he'd be gone for a while, right before he disappeared. And then he came back, Bruce in tow. And Dick apologized, and they all offered him not Robin, but something else. And Tim said no. He was only a placeholder because Batman needed a Robin. And now that Damian is here, he's got one. He's got one and then some, what with the fact that the Bats are a whole clan now. So Tim's job is done. Con hadn't been there for the moment Tim handed in his resignation. Tim still recounted the whole thing to him. The looks of horror, the way Bruce had finally asked, "But you're not leaving." Only it was less like a question and more like a statement. And Con was, at the time, a passionate advocate for Tim leaving Gotham and just moving in with him. But Tim wanted to give the Bats a chance to be his family, and in the past few years, they have been. Con is still a passionate advocate for Tim moving in with him, but he is no longer an advocate for removing the Bats from the picture. So Tim has been just Tim to everyone else for a while now, too. He added the hyphen and the Wayne to his name, and he's the CEO of Bruce's company, and he doesn't have to worry about the night shift. He still hangs out at the tower, and he still trains, and he still knows practically everyone in the superhero community, but he doesn't put on a costume and run around Gotham tracking down criminals at night. Occasionally, he'll play Oracle, and he'll still puzzle through cases. But he tells everyone he's much happier as support only. So why in God's green earth, an expression Con learned from Lois, can Con not hear Tim's heartbeat? Con can always hear Tim's heartbeat. He checks in on it, like, a lot, like multiple times every day. It's one of his favorite sounds. Clark is lecturing him. Tune out his sort of dad and start listening to what Tim's up to. Lex is trying to convince him to go rogue. Time to find out how Tim's meeting is going. Boring class? Tim. Boring mission? Tim. Nightmare? Tim. It's after a nightmare that Con reaches out and can't find his best friend. He starts moving on instinct, nightmare forgotten, calls Tim's cell phone, then his work phone, then his backup cell phone, then his "for superhero emergencies only" phone. Voicemail on all of them. He shoots a text to Bart and Cassie, who both reply pretty much immediately, and confirm they can't get a hold of Tim either. So Con, at roughly 3 a.m, on the East Coast, throws on his jacket and flies to Gotham. Cassandra is the one to greet him, which is probably good because Con likes Cassandra best, and she's also the one he's least likely to throw a punch at if she tells him something he doesn't like. He doesn't have a whole lot of respect for the Bats, okay? But Cass and Steph are usually fine. She's already waiting for him on the roof of Wayne Enterprises, like she knew he was coming. Even though he only left 2 minutes ago, and he lands near her. She doesn't look at him. Or at least, he doesn't think she looks at him. It's hard to tell with Cass sometimes. "What happened?" Con asks, as soon as his feet touch the ground. "Kidnapped," Cass replies, and Con's blood runs cold. "Earlier tonight. Not as Robin, as Tim. They have not reached out for ransom yet, but they will soon." "Okay," Con says, and he pulls out his phone to text Cassie and Bart. Cass reaches out a hand, touching his wrist gently. "Do not worry," she says.
He is strong.
I know, Con says. I worry anyways.
Me too.
Bart and Cassie ask if he wants them to come to Gotham. He relays the question to Cass, who shakes her head.
Less capes, the better,
she says.
But you stay.
Con promises to keep them updated as often as he can, and then follows Cass back to Wayne Manor and down to the cave. It seems like everyone has gathered, and none of them look surprised to see Superboy, barely even sparing him a second glance, except for Stephanie, who marches right up to him, gets up in his face, and narrows her eyes. "Can you find him?" she demands. "I can't hear his heartbeat," Con admits. Steph swears loudly. "There's no shot he's dead," she says, which Con actually hadn't considered somehow. But he's already glad she's pointing it out. They took him from a late-night board meeting. "We're going to need to handle this as civilians, Jason." She finishes with a glare at Red Hood, who throws his hands in the air. "I'm just saying, it would be a hell of a lot easier to track him down and storm the place," Jason says. "He's Gotham's beloved Gen Z billionaire. It wouldn't be that far-fetched to have some superhero come to his rescue." "We don't know where he is," Bruce says, before the conversation can get any further. He's sitting at the massive computer, scrolling through maps. "Hello, Con-El." "Hello, Bruce Wayne," Con says. Bruce, still looking at his maps, raises an eyebrow. Steph and Cass both snicker. They determine that there's not much they can do before the kidnappers reach out about their ransom. They're clearly anticipating superheroes if they blocked off Tim's heartbeat. Which, okay, yeah. Tim gets followed by the paparazzi a lot, and Superboy gets followed by the paparazzi a lot, and it's not hard to put two and two together and realize they're friends. There are a lot of blurry tabloid photos of them to prove it. So it makes sense that they're expecting Con to be looking for Tim. The fact that it makes sense doesn't help Con's nerves, though. Neither does the transmission they receive, sometime around 7 in the morning. Or rather, the transmission that Bruce Wayne receives. Alfred immediately starts tracking IP addresses, and everyone else gathers around as Bruce reads the message sent to his personal email address. "We have your son," he begins. "The one that works for you." "Nice of them to be specific," Jason snorts. Dick hits him. "Warnings about police involvement." Standard kidnap jargon. Damien says, shoving his father to the side so he can skim the email. Bruce gives him a look that he ignores. Con leans over Damien's head to read. Soon, they're all shoving each other, which isn't really effective, but Con's been around the manor enough to know that this is just how they are. The email doesn't contain any useful information, other than that the kidnappers will have a courier drop off a package and a letter at noon. That's it. They wait again. Most of the bats go off to get some sleep. Con and Steph sit parked by one of the front windows and watch the driveway for any sign of the courier. Soon enough, right at noon, a kid on a bike rides up, drops off a small box, and rides away. "Stephanie," Bruce, standing behind them suddenly, says. Steph nods and leaves, and a few minutes later, she takes off to follow the courier, Cass hot on her heels. Bruce goes to get the box and brings it to the kitchen. Dick, Jason, and Damien are already waiting. Con stands next to Dick, and Bruce passes over a letter. "They'll call us at 6 tonight," Dick reads. "Say they'll send proof of life in the box." Bruce opens the box. There's a finger inside. Dick gags and turns away. Jason and Damien's faces both harden. Bruce's jaw clenches. Con, once he gets over the fact that there's a bloody finger in a box, peers closer at it. "That's not Tim's finger," he says after a moment of studying, and everyone stares at him. He does not really feel like explaining to Tim's brothers and father exactly how he knows this, but he doesn't really have a choice. Still, he can leave out the part where he spends hours staring at Tim and memorizing every part of him, because he's in love. They don't really need to know all that. On second thought, they probably all figured that out a long time ago. "What do you mean?" Bruce growls. "It's a pinky," he says. "Too short to be any other finger. And based on the way it tilts, it's from the left hand. Tim has a scar on the outside of his left pinky. It runs all the way down the finger. Damien, despite being the youngest, seems to have the strongest stomach right now, and picks up the finger and turns it on its side. There is no scar," he reports. The clone is right. Con rolls his eyes at the nickname. Of course I'm right. He bites back. Then, because he can't help himself, I'm the world's #1 Tim Drake Wayne expert. I'm president of the fan club and everything. Is there really a fan club? Dick asks. Jason elbows him. Why would they send us a finger that isn't his? Jason asks. To scare us? Most likely as a threat. Bruce says. They aren't afraid to hurt him. Except they are, because that's not his finger. Con points out. Damien, is there still a print? Damien, who for some reason is still holding the finger, examines it. Yes, he says. I will bring it to Pennyworth to be analyzed. They do get biometrics from the fingerprint. An identity and everything. Which means that the bats, because they're the bats and they're all crazy smart or whatever, are able to figure out exactly who the kidnappers are, and their most likely location by 2:15 in the afternoon. At 2:26, Superboy is taking off. The bats want to wait for a phone call, gather all the intel they can before staging a rescue mission. Con disagrees, and because Con doesn't answer to Batman, he can do what he wants. So he takes off and flies to the building that's got a basement and lead-lined walls, takes down 6 goons in approximately 12 seconds, and storms the basement alone. There's no one there, except for Tim, who looks annoyed, but brightens when he sees Con. He's tied to a chair and has a gag in his mouth, and dried blood on his forehead. Con scans the room first, doesn't see anyone, and then goes to untie Tim. He checks for injuries as he goes, and then he finally removes the gag. Tim stands and stretches. Took you long enough, he says. B's gonna kill you for popping into his territory. The fact that Tim is speaking so freely really says a lot about the quality of this kidnapping. There must not be any cameras or recording devices in here. And other than the lead-lined walls, there's not really any superhero proofing. I know. I was just there. Con says. Couldn't hear your heartbeat. Oh, Tim says after a moment, and his bright expression fades. Did you think I was... No, actually, Con snorts. Didn't even cross my mind. Really? I wouldn't need to listen to your heartbeat if you were dead. Con says. I just know. Oh, Tim says again. They stare at each other for a long moment. 'Cause I love you. Con adds, because a lot of things are being put into perspective right now, and the fact that, yes, Tim can take care of himself, and yes, he leads a much safer life now, but something could still happen to him, and Con already died once, and it nearly destroyed Tim, and Tim dying would destroy Con, and really, he can't handle not saying it any longer. I figured, Tim says after a moment, and then he grins a little bit. I love you too. I figured. Con echoes, and Tim laughs, and that makes Con laugh, and then there's a click of a gun. Come on, man, Con says as he turns around, keeping Tim behind him. There's a man standing there, gun pointed between Con's eyes. The man is missing his left pinky finger. You guys are really shitty kidnappers. What? The man starts, and Con darts forward and punches him so hard it knocks him out. Nice, Tim says. Let's get out of here? I thought you'd never ask. Con sighs dreamily, and Tim snickers, and then laughs again, loudly, as Con scoops him up and flies them out of the building. Are you gonna take me back to the manor? Tim asks, as they leave Gotham City limits. Con is not. Con is taking Tim to the tower, because Tim kind of gave him a lot of anxiety with the missing heartbeat, and Con wants Tim all to himself. He tells him as much, and Tim sighs and says, Yeah, okay, let me call Steph when we get there, though. Which he does, still wrapped up in Con's arms. I'm safe, he says. I know. Steph grumbles. We're cleaning up your boyfriend's mess. Silence for a moment. You're not correcting me on the boyfriend thing. Am I supposed to? Tim asks, and there's a lot of shrieking through the phone, and eventually Tim just hangs up. My whole family knows I'm in love with you. I'm pretty sure they also know I'm in love with you. Con admits. We're not good at hiding it. Because they're not. Because Con just ignored Batman's direct orders so he could storm a building and get Tim out before he could get any more hurt. Because Tim's looking at Con with something in his eyes that's all adoration and awe and love, and it's the way Tim always looks at him. Well, Tim says after a moment, at least they can't tease me about it right now. Cassie and Bart arrive soon after, take one look at the two of them on the couch, and immediately dive on top of them to bombard them with questions. Which is exactly what Con expected, them knowing right away. After a while, his eyes start drooping, because it's been a while since he slept, since he first woke up from the nightmare and couldn't find Tim's heartbeat, and Tim looks at him with those same awestruck, adoring eyes, a gleam of mischief and playfulness and something knowing, and Con tunes into his heartbeat. It's steady and it's there, right next to him, in his arms. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Loud and clear and full of love. Con pulls Tim tighter against him and lets the sound of his heartbeat fill his mind as he drifts off to sleep. Notes. Comments and kudos are always appreciated. Are we enjoying the Pride stuff so far, guys? How are we feeling about the Pride stuff? If you enjoyed this fic, you can go down to the description below and follow the link to the author's original work. Leave them many, many comments and kudos. If you enjoyed this reading, you can subscribe if you want. Or, go down to the comments below and tell me what else I should read. I'll talk to the author and see if they're cool with it. Thank you for listening.